Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you here this evening. I'd like to start by extending a very special thank you to our exhibition sponsors. Our supporting sponsor is Neiman Marcus, and we are so very grateful for your incredible generosity. Our partner sponsors are Bank of Texas, Dallas Tourism Public Improvement District, Match Group, North Park Center, Toyota, and Vaquero Private Wealth. Our transportation sponsor is NFI, and the exhibition has also been generously supported by Joyce B. Cohen. I'd also like to thank our exhibition community partners, Dallas College School of Creative Arts, Entertainment, and Design, the Family Place, Junior League of Dallas, League of Women's Voters of Dallas, National Council of Jewish Women of Greater Dallas, and Texas Fashion Collection at the University of North Texas. What an incredible group of sponsors and community partners. We couldn't have put on this exhibition without you. Everyone, please help me thank them. And lastly, among my thanks, I always like to give a warm thank you to our board members who are here, to our museum members, and our volunteers. We couldn't do this work without you, and I'm always so grateful for your support. If you are not a museum member or you're interested in becoming a volunteer, please go on our website and check out information about membership and volunteering. We would love to have your help and would really appreciate it. The museum has been honored to host Walk This Way, the exhibition which sadly is closing this weekend. Walk This Way explores the vital role of women in history through more than 100 pairs of shoes spanning nearly 200 years. And as I said, it closes this Sunday on July 14th. So if you haven't seen it, we encourage you to stay after tonight's program. We'll be open until 9 tonight, or to come back sometime through Sunday, because you definitely need to see the exhibition. Now, it is my honor to welcome Eric Severson, the Chief People, ESG, and Belonging Officer at Neiman Marcus, to provide some opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mary Pat, for the generous welcome this evening. Well, at Neiman Marcus Group, our heritage, which is over 115 years of impact in Texas and beyond, is one of the largest differentiators between our company, Neiman Marcus Group, and other multi-branded luxury retailers. In 1907, Carrie Marcus Neiman, her brother, Herbert Marcus Sr., and her husband, Al Neiman, founded Neiman Marcus in Dallas. And together, this enterprising Jewish family made an indelible mark on Southern and ultimately national culture. At the time that Carrie founded Neiman Marcus in 1907, she was one of the only women to found what became a large American corporation, and did so 13 years before the 19th Amendment granted her the right to vote. As the original buyer for Neiman Marcus, and ultimately the person who established the standard of service that we're famous for today, she played a prominent role in bringing fashion to the South that had not previously been available, in creating the high-touch service model we're known for out of necessity. In the 1950s, Carrie Marcus Neiman became one of the first and only women in the United States to chair a company's board of directors. As our leader and role model at Neiman Marcus, Carrie created an environment that gave people, not only women, but all people, the freedom and power to reach their full potential. And that legacy has endured through today. Neiman Marcus Group today remains a majority female organization from the top to the bottom, including a board of directors which is nearly 2/3 female and all the way to the sailing floor. For more than 2 decades, Neiman Marcus has partnered with the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum to keep the values of Carrie and her family and Neiman Marcus Group alive. We're really proud to contribute to the museum's capital campaign to help increase the number of students and visitors the museum could expose to the lessons learned from the Holocaust and other human rights violations, and teach the importance of being upstanders, or individuals who stand up against bigotry, injustice, indifference, and hate. More recently, we've been proud to serve as the lead sponsor, as Mary Pat said, for the museum's Walk This Way exhibition. And we're delighted to join you at this wonderful event this evening the museum has planned for us. So thank you very much for having us here, and we look forward to the event.
Thanks so much, Eric. It's always a pleasure working with your team, and every time someone from Neiman's comes, I feel like I need to leave and go shopping. Your shoes are amazing. So now it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speaker for tonight. Annette Becker is an arts educator and material culture historian whose research focuses on dress history. She serves as a director of the Texas Fashion Collection, an archive of nearly 20,000 garments and accessories housed within the University of North Texas's College of Visual Arts and Design. I wish you could have brought show and tell, Annette. Becker's curatorial projects and academic programming are informed by her professional experience in cultural institutions around the country, as well as graduate coursework in art history, art education, and history. So I'm very excited to hear her presentation tonight. Before we get started, just have a few housekeeping items. As usual, we will be passing note cards out, or you should have received a note card when you came in. Please write your questions on the note cards, and after Annette is through speaking, we'll come around and collect note cards and do our best to answer as many questions as possible. If you are joining us via Zoom, please type your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those as well. I'd also like to ask you all to silence your cell phones or electronic devices so we can have a great recording of this program. It will be available on our DHHRM YouTube channel, and we don't want cell phones adding to that. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce Annette.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm so grateful to have you all here this evening, and thank you to the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum for hosting me in this space. I really appreciate you all being here this evening. Of course, since I am not at home, this is not the Texas Fashion Collection, my first question for you all is how many of you all heard about the Texas Fashion Collection before showing up this evening? If you could raise your hands. Okay, cool. It looks like a fair number of folks in the audience. That makes me feel like I'm doing my job, which I appreciate. For those of you who are less familiar, I want to share some information about the TFC just to ground the rest of this presentation, and so you might consider us a cultural history resource and a research resource in the future. The photograph you can see on the screen is inside our collection storage space, which is at the University of North Texas's campus up in Denton. What you're seeing here is a room packed literally floor to ceiling with nearly 20,000 historic and designer garments and accessories. What you're seeing in this photograph is just one aisle of 9 that are in this room. In this space, our oldest piece is from between the years 300 and 400. We have some Roman sandals that were dug up from the Thames River in an archaeological excavation, which are both our oldest and probably our ugliest piece in the collection, to be honest. And in this space, our newest pieces are just from the past few years. This room is accessible to researchers by appointment. So we have folks who are 12 years old who want to become fashion designers, college students and faculty members conducting research, people in the fashion industry who want to inform their current work and provide some historical context for decisions they might be making. We have 80-year-olds who want to find inspiration for quilts they're creating. So we really welcome researchers from all backgrounds and with a wide variety of interests. We're also lucky to have a study space in the UNT Art Building where we often host groups of researchers. And here you can see a row of clothing that's all made with sustainability and upcycling in mind. And this is a photograph of some UNT fashion design students who came to see those materials and research them. We're quite lucky in this space that people can even have hands-on access to some of the materials in our collection if their form of research requires them to understand materiality in a hands-on kind of way. Unfortunately, right now, our facilities don't include a permanent exhibition space, but we are lucky to partner with area cultural institutions to share our collection broadly. If you want to pull out your phone and take a photo of this, this can be a reminder for you to go to see two exhibitions we currently have on view. One at the Dallas Arboretum, focused on floral fashion, and one at the Tyler Museum of Art, focused on the history of Todd Oldham, who happens to be have a lot of ties to Dallas, Texas, in his storied career. Today, he might be best remembered for making about a third of the clothes that Fran Drescher wore in the TV series The Nanny. A very Jewish-coded figure who's wearing very loud, vibrant clothing, much of which was designed by this Texas designer icon. We're also quite lucky through support of the Heart of Neiman Marcus Foundation, among other supporters, to be able to digitize our collection. So even though not everyone can make a research appointment to see the biggest, most beautiful closet in North Texas, if you have an internet connection, you're welcome to go to our website and look at over 65,000 images of nearly 10,000 pieces in our collection. Almost half of our collection has been digitized, nearly entirely through paid support from students who work with us at the university. So the images you're seeing on the screen are just a small variety, a small sampling of the materials that we have. And believe it or not, all of these images were taken by students. We're quite lucky to work with such skilled people. And though they would probably hate to have me represent them this way, this is a photograph of our team. We really are lucky that even though I'm the director and get to have the privilege of standing in front of audiences, I'm not the one who's doing every single day-to-day task to make our collection happen. We're quite lucky to have this scrappy group of students who come from a wide variety of backgrounds and are studying a wide variety of disciplines in our space. They often execute projects. They ask big questions that sometimes even I can't answer. And they really provide a lot of the energy and support for our holdings. We're quite lucky to have them with us. So that's just a brief overview of the Texas Fashion Collection. I'd encourage you to follow us on social media, follow other programs that we might be able to do at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum in the future. Now you might be asking yourself why I'm standing up here, a representation of the University of North Texas in Denton, talking with you about high fashion. And that's really because our collection exists because of the really deep fashion industry roots that have been built in Dallas over the past basically 130 years. I'm quite lucky to be standing here reporting back about the history of thousands of people who have made Dallas a cultural capital, not only in our region, but in our nation and even globally. There have been people who have worked in all facets of the fashion industry in the DFW area, and it's really my privilege as a historian to be able to share some of their stories with you. A lot of those figures are Jewish and come from Jewish backgrounds. Historically, the fashion industry has been supported in the U.S. by Jewish immigrants. We might start that story in the mid-19th century with a lot of German Jewish immigrants who moved to the U.S. Many of them landed in New York, and many of us know about how strong the New York fashion industry is. A lesser known story might be that many of those immigrants ended up in Texas as well, and even Carrie Marcus Neiman came from Jewish German stock and ended up in Dallas. So many of the stories that we have to share come from Jewish immigrants who came to the U.S. Following that first wave of Jewish German immigration, towards the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries, there was another wave of immigrants from Eastern Europe, Jewish people who were fleeing from persecution, looking forward to the opportunity that the United States represented. Many of them stayed in New York, but a great number of them landed in Dallas, Texas. And we're lucky to be able to tell the stories of some of those Jewish people who have really built our Dallas fashion community this evening. I will admit that I was given, I think, 45 or 50 minutes to tell this history, so I cannot mention everyone. I could keep you here until next year this time with those stories. So tonight we're just going to focus on a few figures and organizations that have really transformed fashion history. This evening, I'm planning on focusing on three big figures, big characters in DFW fashion history, all Jewish figures. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a rapid-fire list of designers who have transformed fashion so that the wardrobes we have today can be more advanced, more interesting, and offer more options for us. So are you all on board? Okay, excellent. I'm excited for this energy. Of course, it's fitting after our introduction that we start with Neiman Marcus. Neiman Marcus, as was mentioned, was founded in 1907, so there's a very long history to Neiman's, and not everyone recognizes that this department store was started in Dallas, Texas. These are two advertisements that are currently housed in the Stanley Marcus papers at the SMU DeGolyer Library. So if you're interested in doing more research on Neiman Marcus's history, that's a really wonderful place to start. I think it's cruel to share images that you can't read, so I've pulled out a few excerpts for us to dig into more detail. So here we have an excerpt that's really talking about how Neiman Marcus Company, as this new institution, is going to ensure that there's a high quality of merchandise in their store. That is a really transformational thing for a department store to offer. To understand that, we might have to think back in fashion history to what was going on with fashion production in 1907. For women's wear, there were a few options of clothing that were ready-made, like shirtwaist blouses, some undergarments, things that were really simple that didn't require complicated construction. Those were being produced industrially in manufacturing sites, like Lorch was a manufacturer in Dallas that made some materials like that. But because this industrial system was still sort of getting used to producing women's wear clothes, a lot of what was being produced was not very high quality. There wasn't a lot of quality control. People were really just trying their best to churn out a lot of product, especially for manufacturers based in New York. So for Neiman Marcus to promote that they are ensuring a high quality of product was really important so that consumers knew they could go to this department store and trust what they were purchasing. I think that's something that we take for granted when we purchase a lot of things today, though I will admit in my own online shopping, I have been bungled a few times. We might be able to relate to having an image of something in our mind or seeing it at first and then having something not hold up to the quality expectations we have later on. Apparently, we all just need to go back to 1907 and shop at Neiman Marcus. We might also recognize that in this early ad that Neiman Marcus placed, there's an emphasis placed on the three founders of Neiman Marcus. And of course, we must talk about Carrie Marcus Neiman. Many of you all, I'm sure, have read the book A Girl Named Carrie, which was written by Jerry Marcus Smith, who recently passed away. We're so lucky to have that really incredible history that she researched so thoroughly, sharing the history of Carrie Marcus Neiman. She was really a transformational figure in Neiman Marcus existing. She, at one point, had worked at Harris & Co., which was, at that point, the like a really wonderful general store and department store that was based in downtown Dallas. She rose to be the top seller there and decided that she wanted to use those skills to make her own fortune. So she joined in with her husband and her brother to help found Neiman Marcus. While the guys brought their own skills, Carrie Marcus Neiman really had an eye for what would be good to sell at Neiman's. She was the one who was actually making sure that quality control happened, and she was really thinking about what women in Dallas needed to buy, what was actually practical for their lifestyles. So she would go to places like New York, meet with manufacturers, and she essentially served as a buyer and filled the store Neiman Marcus with the beautiful things that we now have at the Texas Fashion Collection. This is a lovely example of a piece that both belonged to Carrie Marcus Neiman and is the kind of design that she would purchase to then sell at Neiman Marcus. Today, Neiman's is really known for luxury products, and this is certainly one of those. This is a beautiful clutch coat from the 1920s made out of this dense black velvet, which in photographs is hard to appreciate because that velvet just absorbs every bit of light that hits it. It's a very dramatic design, oversized as a clutch coat so that it could be held at the center front closed in a sort of dramatic posture. You might notice that there are some red details on this coat as well. Those were created out of historic paisley shawls, which had become popular over the course of the 19th century. And here they were repurposed to create this very bohemian clutch coat. This is certainly a very special design. I do think it's worth remembering, though, that in Neiman Marcus's early years, and really even through the 1960s and 70s, Neiman Marcus was known for also carrying just high-quality clothing that a lot of people could afford. Later leadership at Neiman Marcus would describe that they hoped that people could shop at Neiman's, that both the boss and the boss's secretary would be able to afford materials there. Today, we often associate high quality with high cost, but at Neiman Marcus, they were really interested in making sure that at a variety of price points, high quality was accessible to a lot of people. So these are just a few examples of some materials that we are certain Carrie Marcus Neiman helped select to retail at Neiman Marcus in the 1930s. To one side, we have a sporty blouse, which honestly I think many of us could don today and we'd think nothing of it. This is such a timeless style and constructed so well that 90 years later it's still in great condition. We might think of that as an iconic version of American sportswear that was developing in the 1930s, which is a way that we still tend to dress today with layers, having things that are easy to wear with stretch fabric. This blouse was an extension of the sportswear that was developed basically as what American fashion was and is today. You can certainly see that sporting connection with the men's vest in the center, which is inspired by golf clothing and clothing that was worn mainly in the UK and in Scotland. This is made with a really elevated material with good construction, but this would have been accessible to middle-class buyers who might have gone to Neiman Marcus. And of course, Neiman's has always had luxury material. So on the end, we can see a piece that was manufactured by Hattie Carnegie. Carnegie was not her given birth name. She was a Jewish immigrant who came to the U.S., I think in the 19-teens or 20s, and changed her last name to Carnegie. I think we can understand the aspiration associated with that, and perhaps an effort to minimize an identity as a Jewish person that might have caused her problems dealing with people who are outside the Jewish community and outside the fashion industry. This Hattie Carnegie fur cape from shoulder to floor is made out of monkey hair, which is something we don't see often today, but there was certainly a vogue for that in the 1920s and 30s. And if I had to take a guess, I think something like this would likely cost around $12,000 in today's money. So really interesting to think about Neiman Marcus as a site for so many people to shop under Carrie Marcus Neiman's leadership, that a relatively affordable blouse and then a pretty unaffordable to most people monkey fur cape could be sold in the same store, serving the same community of Dallas fashion consumers. Carrie Marcus Neiman did a really incredible job serving as a buyer through essentially the first 30 years of the store's development. Around the mid-1930s, the Marcus brothers, who were Carrie Marcus Neiman's nephews, were coming back from college. They were interested in being involved in the family business, and several of them took leadership roles at Neiman's. It was really under her tutelage that a lot of the figures we remember today, like Mr. Stanley Marcus, that Carrie Marcus Neiman was able to share her expertise, her knowledge, and help this next generation understand the Neiman Marcus way. It's with support from Carrie Marcus Neiman that a lot of the important things that Neiman's continues to do were established. So, for example, as part of celebrating the 30th anniversary of Neiman Marcus, Edward and Stanley Marcus started the Neiman Marcus Award for Distinguished Service in the Field of Fashion, which, let me tell you, is a mouthful. I'm really grateful that the press generally dubbed it the Oscars of fashion, which I find rolls off the tongue far more easily. The Oscars of Fashion was presented annually from 1938 really through the 1970s, and then occasionally since then, and the award has recently been resurrected. So this is a distinction that continues to impact fashion. I think today we might think most about the Academy Awards or music industry awards, that they celebrate people we already know about. But especially in 1938, when this award was established, it brought in figures internationally to Dallas, and it celebrated up-and-coming American designers who had not yet been recognized at that point. One particularly successful moment in the Neiman Marcus Award is represented here. If you don't read the caption, maybe you could still guess that on the side we see Christian Dior himself, who made his very first trip to the United States to come to Dallas, USA, to receive the Neiman Marcus Award. If you want to hear more about that happening, you're welcome to get the Christian Dior autobiography, which dedicates an entire chapter to his time in Dallas, receiving the Neiman Marcus Award, deciding he doesn't like barbecue because it's too highly seasoned. I'm sure he was not asked back after that comment. But clearly having Dior see this award as something important enough to sail partway around the world to come to Dallas to receive this shows the cultural capital and the financial capital that Neiman Marcus, a Jewish-run department store, had. We're quite lucky that the Texas Fashion Collection was also started at the same time as the Neiman Marcus Award. I'm told that it's largely under the stewardship of Carrie Marcus Neiman that Neiman started saving contemporary examples of clothing that were for sale in their store to form an archive. I think this is a really savvy thing to do because institutions that have history have a lot of cultural capital. They're the ones that we continue to talk about and that we think about the history and how much that informs an institution's importance today. So for Carrie Marcus Neiman and Neiman Marcus to both have this award and then document it is so important. I share the scrapbook page because this is a Christian Dior dress from Dior's second collection that was collected the same season that this was produced. This is really special to us because this dress is from 1947, the same year that Christian Dior opened his house and the same year he received the Neiman Marcus Award. So this is not Neiman Marcus and Carrie Marcus Neiman, following the sales of the fashion winds and just doing what everyone else is. This is them taking a leadership stance and deciding that Dallas is a fashion-forward place, and they're going to recognize Christian Dior long before many other people did. So we're quite lucky that at the Texas Fashion Collection, we have many examples of designers and design innovation that Carrie Marcus Neiman identified, and then later generations of Neiman Marcus leadership recognized too. So a few winners of the Neiman Marcus Award, we have Christian Dior. We have Bonnie Cashin, who's one of my favorites. If any of you all, like me today, have on layers of clothing that you've put on because it's really hot outside and nice and air-conditioned cool in here, the concept of layering clothing was introduced to Euro-American fashion by Bonnie Cashin. And the year that she created a collection with layering in 1950 was also the year she received the Neiman Marcus Award. So if you have on layers, you can, in your head, say, thank you, Bonnie Cashin. We might also think about Emilio Pucci. How many of you all have heard of him? Yeah, basically everyone's hands going up. That makes sense. So Emilio Pucci was an impoverished nobleman, a job I would love to have. In Florence, Italy, he inherited his family's estate and had no way to support himself. So he made really beautiful hand-painted scarves that he presented to Stanley Marcus. Mr. Stanley said, those are lovely, but you're not going to sell enough to meet your goals here. Why don't you turn those into really simple dresses and shirts, and we'll sell those instead. Needless to say, the Pucci brand continues today based on that very savvy advice. And Emilio Pucci is another designer who won the Neiman Marcus Award. We might also think about Rudi Gernreich, a Jewish designer who was born in Austria, and his family fled to the US right before World War II happened to escape persecution. Rudi Gernreich is a name that most of us likely don't know, but if you have ever worn thong underwear or a brassiere that does not have foam or wires in it, a no-bra bra, Rudi Gernreich is the person you can thank for that. and he certainly won the Neiman Marcus Award too. So needless to say, these are all designers who have really shaped fashion and fashion history. We're quite lucky to have Neiman Marcus as such an important institution in our community, and we can continue to think about the ways that Carrie Marcus Neiman's leadership and the Jewish leadership of Neiman's transformed fashion. So that is our first story. One down, two more big ones to go. The next person I'd like to share with you, I think, is less remembered in cultural history and in dress history, but is someone that we hold really dear at the Texas Fashion Collection. Lilli Wolff, we know her most as a Dallas-based dressmaker who made custom designs for people who lived in the DFW area, primarily female socialites and debutantes who needed custom-made dresses created for them. Luckily, we have a large cache of materials of hers at the Texas Fashion Collection, and there are some other collections like the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum that include other information about her history and her legacy. Part of my information about her is drawn from this testimonial pamphlet that you can find pretty easily online. So Lilli Wolff was born in Germany. As a young Jewish person, she decided she wanted to open a custom dressmaking company. So she had a business that was open in Berlin, I think, for 17 years. Of course, we know what happened in Germany in the 1930s. There were Aryanization laws that essentially made it so no Jewish person could own a business, and Lilli Wolff was required to shut down her custom dressmaking business with no financial compensation and no ability to continue on with that path in her career. She then transitioned to becoming a theater costume designer, and we think these two designs were likely created by her when she was working either in Berlin or later in Vienna when she moved there with some of her friends. So Lilli Wolff's background is really in custom dressmaking and then making really theatrical designs that really, I think, celebrate the character of a person and can be read from the person in the back row in an audience. That's pretty important for us to think about, especially since Lilli Wolff's career and creative trajectory definitely got put on hold during World War II. She moved from Berlin to Vienna and then was told that she was supposed to pack up her belongings to be shipped off somewhere else, location TBD. She packed her bags, but at the last minute decided that was not something she wanted to do, that it would not be safe for her. And luckily, she had a friend named Dorothea Neff who kept her in hiding in her apartment for, I think, 3 or 4 years through World War II. The entire time, essentially hiding in closets. Dorothea Neff and Maddie Dreesen, one of her close friends, would try to use all of their food tickets to try to get enough food to keep her alive. They were constantly on edge, thinking that they would likely be found out. I can't imagine how traumatizing that would be, and how lucky for Lilli Wolff to have people in her life who were so close to her, who chose to do the right thing and be upstanders in those moments. After World War II ended in 1947, Lilli Wolff decided to immigrate to the United States. She first landed in New York City, where she designed some custom garments for someone who went on to become Miss America. But the part of her story I really care about now, at least while she's in the US, is that she was a custom dressmaker in Dallas. So the process that she went through, I think, is really special and worth considering because it's so different than how most of us have clothes made today. You can see here that we have a photograph, just a snapshot of Lilli Wolff meeting with 2 women in their home, looking at maybe some textile samples, most likely trying to decide how best to make a wedding dress. Lilli Wolff was very talented in her creative endeavors. So we can see here also a sketch that she created for another design. She used these sketches both to communicate with clients what she was creating, but then also to work with Maddie Dreesen, who is a dressmaker. So Maddie Dreesen was with her in Berlin, was with her in Vienna, and then moved to the US with her. Historically, that story has been told that they were simply business partners, but I think we can all read between the lines and understand that they meant more than that to each other. And we especially know that because Klaus Dreesen, who donated the sketches and photographs we have in our collection, was Maddie Dreesen's son, and he has shared that both Maddie and Lilli raised him as though they were both his mothers, which is a really incredible story. We're lucky that that creative partnership yielded really beautiful things. Many many of which are now in our collection. So here you can see a sketch by Lilli Wolff, and then luckily she had Maddie Dreesen, who was able to translate that sketch into really beautiful custom-made dresses, like the one that Maddie created here on the side. We're lucky to have both the sketch, the dress, and photographs of the person who commissioned this in our collection. So the photograph in the middle is of Harriet Williams Peavy, whose mother donated the dress, but more recently has donated photographs of her wearing this. And I will apologize, when we first photographed the artifact, we did not have the appropriate petticoats. So before anyone comes at me that there should be, a balloon having inflated the skirt, I understand. But you can see here that this is a really important set of relationships that's developed, that we have this Jewish dressmaker who's bringing a lot of her skills from her fashion practice, from her theater practice, bringing that to Dallas, and then working with a lot of people who, some of her clients were of Jewish German descent, some of them were just of German descent, and that these pieces really shaped the cultural landscape in Dallas and the DFW area. The photograph in the middle is from the Brenham Mayfest, which is internationally known. Apparently, the debutante was told she had to wear a yellow dress, and I think the one that she showed up in was far better than the ones in the background, but maybe that's just me, because that's the one we have in our collection. Lilli Wolff was very prolific, making a lot of custom dresses. So many of them, I think, really lean on her background as a theater designer. For example, I can't imagine going to the grocery store in this design. So you can see that she really has a flair for the dramatic, thinking in big, bold details that luckily Maddie Dreesen was able to translate into actual garments. Some of the pieces she created or the sketches she made also leaned on her Bavarian history. So it's lovely having these really sweet examples of sketches in our collection. And then my personal favorite is this really vampy one. So I can imagine that not all of these sketches turned into dresses that people actually wore, but thinking about the cultural richness that, that Lilli Wolff was immersed in the Jewish theater community and the Jewish dressmaking communities in Berlin and Vienna, certainly those communities supported her birthing ideas like this later in her career. And of course, many people in Dallas were quite lucky to be able to wear far more wearable pieces that she created. So as much as she had a flair for the dramatic, I think she often translated that into very wearable designs that still had details that you could read across the room, which I think is what every socialite in the 1950s and 60s probably wanted out of their wardrobes. So we're quite lucky to have a big institution like Neiman Marcus and a local dressmaker like Lilli Wolff represented in our Dallas fashion community as Jewish innovators and with pieces at the Texas Fashion Collection. The third set of figures I want to share with you today is one of my personal favorites. So now I want to share with you the story of Pageboy Maternity. Can you all raise your hand? Who has heard of Pageboy Maternity? I see a few hands. Oh, I love that so much. And I will say there's a hand in the center front and the bottom that belongs to Gigi Gartner. We're very lucky to have Pageboy Maternity royalty in our audience this evening. So if you look at this photograph, I think towards the center is Louise Gartner, who is Gigi's mother. Louise Gartner was one of 3 of the Frankfurt sisters who, oh, okay, nope, she's on the other side, the left. Okay, thank you, Gigi. It's a good thing you can recognize your mom. So we're quite lucky to have Pageboy Maternity as part of our Dallas fashion cultural heritage. The Pageboy was started in 1937 by the 3 Frankfurt sisters who were Jewish sisters who were all under the age of 30 when they started Pageboy Maternity. Here you can see them pictured a few years later, very happy with their innovations and the success that that's brought them. I think this was taken in a new space that they'd recently had constructed for their business, which included both direct-to-consumer retail model and manufacturing, which was pretty unusual for the Dallas fashion industry. So for those of you who have not heard of Pageboy, I'm going to blow your minds. Pageboy was the first company to make fashionable maternity clothing. So if we think back to the early 1930s and before that, pregnancy was not a phase of life that was celebrated in the fashion community or by people in general. Today we have celebrities who are on the covers of magazines showing off their baby bumps like it's this year's hottest new accessory. Historically, that was not the case. And the fashion industry certainly did not celebrate pregnancy. Most people tended to just wear their everyday clothing, skirts hiked up over their baby bump, making an uneven hemline, horribly uncomfortable, really unsightly. I don't think most people feel very comfortable when they're at the ends of their pregnancies, and to have clothing that makes you feel like your body doesn't fit with your wardrobe would likely make that even worse. I think it's really important then to think about Pageboy Maternity creating a pretty simple innovation, but one that was really revolutionary. So this is a patent, one of fewer than 100 that were issued to women in 1937. So that's also important to note, that this is a patent that the Frankfurt sisters received for their innovation for maternity designs. So you can see that the real innovation here is the skirt. There's a U shape cut out of the front and then a series of tapes that could be adjusted based on how big a baby bump is. That really made it so that women who were pregnant could wear fashionable clothing and participate in society and in celebrating themselves through clothes in the way that everyone else got to. So these early pieces in the late 1930s and early 1940s, I would say are more on the side of luxury fashion. So their first shop was based in one of the most I think like the lobby area of one of the most fashionable and sought after obstetricians in Dallas. These designs tended to retail in today's money for between $300 and $500 for a full ensemble, which today sounds like a lot of money, but people historically also spent more of their income on clothing. They owned fewer things that were better made and lasted longer. So here you can see that we have a very sober suit made out of blue velvet with some piecework detailing and some cord stitch to it. So this is not made to be worn just one or two times. This is made for someone to really feel confident going into a lot of social situations wearing them. Pageboy continued to change and develop through the next decades. So in the 1950s, we have super sweet styles that often refer to flowers, hyper feminine designs that I think fit in with a post-war idea of femininity that was very popular, again, allowing pregnant women to participate in high fashion. Then we get to the 1960s, where that U-shape cutout was deemed no longer really fashionable by the designers at Pageboy. So instead, the designers switched to having a series of pleats across the front that could be let out and adjusted based on how pregnant you were. And this style was so popular that even Jackie Kennedy was known for wearing that exact piece. So our records make it slightly unclear whether this piece was actually on Jackie Kennedy's body or if this is the same style that she was documented wearing. But needless to say, Pageboy made it so that Jackie Kennedy could participate in things like the presidential campaign because she could have fashionable maternity clothing to wear. And then one of my favorite designs by Pageboy is a late 1960s maxi dress made out of this patchwork quilt print. So you can imagine that even being able to go to a fondue party wearing fashionable clothing was possible because of Pageboy. If you would like to get your Pageboy fix, we currently have a piece on view at the Dallas Arboretum. There are 8 pieces on view in that exhibition, and we wanted to make sure that Pageboy was represented at this Dallas cultural institution. So Pageboy has done a lot of great things for us. There are a lot of Jewish American fashion designers who have really transformed how we dress today. So now I'm going to go through a lot of slides, give you a lot of information, so you'll just be so overwhelmed and grateful for the innovation of Jewish American fashion designers. You all ready? Yeah, you're buckled in? Okay, so Gilbert Adrian, who went by the professional name Adrian, is best known for serving as a Hollywood costume designer. If you are a fan of silver screen style and like Joan Crawford's severe shoulder pads, you can thank Adrian right now because he's the one who did most of her costume design and then was also the first Hollywood costume designer to transition to being a famous fashion designer, making his designs for screen available to people like you and me. He He also won the Neiman Marcus Award. Anne Klein, a name that many of us might be familiar with. Fewer people remember that in the 1950s and early 1960s, she essentially invented the juniors category of clothing. So before that point, there was clothing for children. There was clothing maybe for like the college set, but clothing for that in-between age had not really been established, or clothing for really petite grown women. So she was known for designing for petite figures, but with sophisticated styles. If you yourself or anyone you know has ever shopped in a junior section, thank you, Anne Klein, a Jewish designer. Many of us know Judith Lieber. If any of you all tonight brought the world's tiniest handbag that could only hold a tube of lipstick and a $100 bill, that is because Judith Lieber popularized very, very small handbags in the 1960s and on. Judith Lieber, I think, also won the Neiman Marcus Award. We're lucky to have many examples of her work in our collection. Some of them, the small iconic pieces that she's known for that are cast in metal and covered in Swarovski crystals. But she was also really innovative in using textiles that were less celebrated. So here you can see an example of, I think, some Chinese embroidery that was repurposed on a Judith Lieber handbag. If anyone showed up today in a wrap dress, Deanne von Furstenberg, also an important Jewish-American fashion designer. While she herself did not actually invent this style, she did popularize it and make it so especially women who were entering the workforce in the 1970s and 80s had something that was flattering and comfortable and appropriate to wear in the workplace. So wrap dresses, Jewish-American designer. We might also think about Ralph Lauren, who started his life as Ralph Lipschitz, which is a quite different name. But again, maybe like Hattie Carnegie was interested in perhaps obscuring his identity so that it wouldn't cause problems for him in a society that I think still continues to often hold anti-Semitic sentiments towards people. So Ralph Lauren, we can appreciate his work for how he has codified and popularized different stereotypes of American dress. If you identify as wearing preppy dress, if you enjoy wearing Western wear clothing that you did not buy at a store where they also sell cattle feed, that is because of Ralph Lauren. He's really, I think, been able to see what the American cultural imagination holds and translate that into fashions that we find quite wearable. And really, we're lucky that at the Texas Fashion Collection, we hold so many of these stories. Like I said, I could easily keep you here until next week discussing all of the really important Jewish leaders that are represented at the Texas Fashion Collection. The fashion industry, especially in the US, would not exist without Jewish leadership. And we're so lucky to be here tonight to think about the importance of Jewish innovators in our community. Thank you.
I think we could listen to you until this time next year. Yeah, you're amazing. And as you all are leaving near the upstander sign that goes into the entrance to the exhibition, there's a little box with a medal, and that's Maddie Dreesen's medal being recognized as Righteous Among the Nations for saving Lilli Wolff.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yes.
I didn't know that was here.
Yes.
Caroline joked that there were Kleenexes up here if I needed them, and that might actually inspire that.
Yeah, I love
that's
that
incredible.
You featured them. So we were so touched that Klaus shared that with us. Okay, so get your questions coming, and our staff will come around and get them, and we'll start with this one. Let's see. As we saw in the exhibition, the progression of women's rights went hand in hand with the evolution of fashion in the 20th century. In your research, what trends in fashion speak to you most about the social and cultural changes that women have gone through?
Oh, that's such an interesting and thoughtful question. Count on you all to have good things to ask. Let's see. So We might think about the 1920s, the flapper style dress. I think that's often a decade that we think about women having recently gained suffrage and clothing becoming more free and flexible. I think that's especially important thinking about how we consider bodies. So the 1920s fashion was a moment when, because of that more simplified silhouette, clothing could be mass manufactured in a more effective way, which really democratized fashion. That you didn't have to have few things made just for your body, but that you could participate in broader social trends and cultural trends and fashion trends by buying ready-made clothing. I think that might be a moment. We might also think about Rudi Gernreich, the person I mentioned earlier who invented thong underwear. I hope you don't just remember him for that, but that is a really iconic thing to know about. Rudi Gernreich, another one of the main innovations that he brought to fashion from the world of dance costume was introducing stretchy double knit wool to high fashion. So today, if you're wearing like a knit, like a cotton, like a t-shirt that's made out of a jersey knit, you're wearing a sweatshirt, you're wearing a cardigan, that's likely partially because of Rudi Gernreich. We kind of take for granted today that our clothes fit close around us because we have so much stretch in our clothing, but introducing that stretchy double knit wool meant that clothing could fit our bodies rather than our bodies having to fit to a garment. So you might think about the difference between wearing something that's really tailored that might require undergarments that shape your body, shifting from that to wearing stretchy knits so that every body can fit in clothes was a major innovation. And if we think about that happening in conjunction with the sexual revolution in the 1960s and women's rights movements in the 1960s, Rudi Gernreich and his designs were right along with that. He was an outspoken feminist, one of the founders of the Mattachine Society, which was important for advancing gay rights in the US. It's not by coincidence that this Jewish designer introduced a design innovation and was involved in social change at the same time. So those are just a few moments.
Just a few. Good. So as we all know, fashion is cyclical. Right now, trends from the early 2000s are coming back. How far back does the phenomenon of cyclicality go? Is that something that was created with the advent of the department store, or does cyclical fashion go back for centuries?
That's a really interesting question. So off the top of my head, my first thought is that in the 19th century, a lot of styles were created that were looking to the past. And I think a lot of that has to do with the boom of popular press and the accessibility of a lot of print materials that were circulated nationally and globally. That there could be books that were about the history of costume and the history of dress that people who were even local dressmakers could look at and take inspiration from, I think meant that these 19th century designers and creators were recycling ideas from the past in their own way. I think now there is a real interest in borrowing from the archive, as I think a lot of people say. So wearing things that are maybe from the past 30 years or so. It shows that you are clever, that you can source things that not everyone else can, that you don't want to dress like everyone else by finding pieces from the last several decades and wearing those sort of as an anti-fashion and hyper-fashion moment. I think we're lucky today to have access to so many of those materials through things like secondhand websites. It's really easy to find and wear secondhand clothes and vintage clothes. In the past, I think it was more people sort of drawing inspiration from those historic styles. One thing that comes to mind with that is Pageboy Maternity created a set of dolls that they circulated through department stores, I think in the 1950s and 60s, that had different figures from throughout history. So we have an Empress Josephine, an Empress Eugenie, we have a Cleopatra, little porcelain dolls that are all pregnant, with little note cards that explain why those historic styles would be particularly fashionable for a pregnant figure. We have those dolls at the Texas Fashion Collection. They're quite fragile, so please don't email me asking to see them. But I think even that shows that in the 1950s and 60s, there was this desire to look to the past, to understand what other options might be available. And they say there's no new thing that can be designed under the sun. In some ways that is true, but there are always new combinations and new ways to contextualize design details that make them fresh and exciting.
This may be the hardest question you'll get. What is your favorite piece in the Texas Fashion Collection?
Oh, my favorite piece. This is not going to be the answer that's satisfying to most people, but we have a tiara from the 1930s by an unknown maker. We have no clue who gifted it to us. It is made out of chicken wire, glitter, and glue. And if the TFC were on fire right now, that is one of the pieces I would go back in for. And that might sound like a really bananas decision because we have a piece from Dior's second collection. We have, fur coats that have been appraised at $250,000. We have really priceless cultural treasures in our space. But that chicken wire tiara speaks to me deeply. I grew up on a farm in rural western Kansas. My hometown has 250 people. The closest Walmart's 90 miles away, and the closest airport's a 5.5-hour drive. I affectionately call where I grew up East Jesus Nowhere. So needless to say, the Dior's and Givenchy's in our collection, I find them really interesting from a research perspective, but I don't have personal experience with those designers and brands. But I sure do know my way around some chicken wire. And I can understand why someone might make something like that.
A harvest festival.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Why someone might look around them, recognize they have few resources, and want to use the resources they have to elevate their everyday experience and make them feel special. And really that impulse is what's at the heart of most of the pieces in our collection. So while I cannot imagine wearing a Givenchy dress myself, I can't imagine wearing a chicken wire tiara. And through that, I can understand the subjectivities of other people who are represented in our collection.
Well, maybe can you send us a picture of the chicken wire tiara that we can send out with our post?
I would be delighted. And here, maybe...
I feel the need to see this now. You don't have it, right?
I'll go back a little too far, but if you go to our website, this is probably going to make you all like motion sick looking at all those things clicking through. But if you go to this website and you do a search for chicken wire, it will be the only thing that shows up, which I'm sure you aren't surprised by.
Good. So along those same lines, who is your personal favorite designer and why?
Oh, that's a good question, too. So historically, Bonnie Cashin is my favorite, the designer I mentioned who introduced layering to fashion. So she did that. She made sure that most of her designs had very big pockets, which I think is almost a political statement at this point for women's dress. Yeah. She also brought turn lock closures from the tops of convertibles, so attaching convertible tops to the cars, to high fashion. And if you all have seen Coach handbags that have those little metal clasps that turn 90 degrees, that's a design innovation she brought to them in the 1960s. So she made a lot of really practical decisions that I think really impact our dress today. Personally, my favorite designer for my own wardrobe is Henrik Vibskov, who is a designer who's based in Copenhagen. And a lot of his work really plays with sculptural shapes for bodies and interprets folk culture through high fashion. Please do not start looking for his things secondhand online if you are my size. I don't want to be in competition with you. But there are a lot of really incredible makers working in a lot of different places. So I'd encourage you all to keep your eyes wide open and often looking at museum collections to think about designers who are lesser remembered and looking for them. You can find some really quality pieces.
Cool. You've mentioned repurposed materials a couple of times. How valued historically was sustainability in a fashion landscape?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I think the way we use sustainability today is not like a phrase that got used historically in the same way. But I think in the past, people had to be economical with their textiles and make decisions that really maximized the length that materials were used. So for example, in the 1800s, the cost of fabric could be as much as 80% of the cost of a garment, which is kind of wild if we think about that ratio between materials cost and labor costs today for most fashion. So in the past, in the 1800s, all of the stitches were often undone for garments when they needed to be laundered, when things were put away for the next year. And then those textiles were repurposed the next year, often making a slightly different silhouette that followed that year's popular trends. That often means pieces in our collection are quite petite, because the things that get saved are often the things that are too small to be reworn by people, and then often the last iteration of how that textile was used. People in the 1800s would not have called that sustainability, but that is a sustainability practice. I often think when people who are interested in sustainability come to the Texas Fashion Collection, they're doing a really savvy thing, because there are so many practices from the past that aren't norms today that we can learn from. The past is really a treasure trove of ideas that should be resurrected. Not all of them, obviously, but from a design standpoint, there are a lot of things that we might reconsider today.
So you've told us tonight about female leaders in the industry, and it was really rare during the time periods of the designers that you mentioned, and still rare today. Do you know stories about those women if they experience setbacks or criticism as they gain notoriety?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Believe it or not, in the American fashion industry, most conversations have been led by women historically. So at the Texas Fashion Collection, the majority of designers represented there are women. And I think the reason we don't understand that today about the history of fashion is because the people who get celebrated are often men. If you had to list one designer that was really famous from fashion history, Dior would probably be it. Then maybe Givenchy, maybe Halston. We might think about, or Karl Lagerfeld. We might think about these figures that continue to be celebrated today, and how every time we tell their stories again, we're losing an opportunity to tell the story of someone who's being actively forgotten. In our collection, we have hundreds of examples of women designers, of people who led manufacturing. The fashion industry really has been a leader in female leadership. So it's really just up to us to challenge the histories that are being told just with men and dig a little bit deeper and encourage people like me to not just fall back on the easy narratives. It's really the jobs of people who run museums and archives to continue to interrogate the past and bring up stories that are being forgotten. I will also share that especially when it comes to the New York fashion industry, it was almost exclusively Jewish women who are at the forefront. Many of them were really important in organizing for labor rights in the fashion industry. Jewish women were important for organizing essentially like groups that promoted fashion originality and protecting designs, which is something that doesn't exist in the US for fashion design today. There were a lot of Jewish women who were really at the forefront of that. And I honestly don't think that's by chance. One of my friends who's from Israel has shared that there's like a tenet in Jewish culture about actionable change that makes the world a better and more just place. And I think with that, many female Jewish leaders, especially in the New York fashion industry, have made a point of putting themselves out there and pushing conversations forward when many other people didn't have the courage or the wherewithal to do that. And that actionable change, I think, is something that all of us could take to heart.
Right. Oh my goodness, so you led right into this next question, which asks, based on current rising anti-Semitism, how can Jews in fashion inspire change and positivity? So what are some of the things that you are seeing other than speaking out? Are there ways that they're making an impact through their work?
That's a good question. Let's see. Well, I know there are a lot of Jewish designers who are involved in professional organizations, making sure that like a diversity of designers are being supported and celebrated. So, for example, if you look at the membership of like the Council of Fashion Designers of America, a lot of them are Jewish designers who are really helping make sure that the industry stays on track. Making sure that when there are like hate acts or hate speech, that there are statements put out. I honestly think that a lot of the work that's being done in the fashion industry to combat anti-Semitism is happening a little bit under the radar. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the fashion industry is so competitive today, that really the first message that people are hearing is about consuming new fashion products. And often the social justice messaging takes second tier to that, which I can understand understand and appreciate. A lot of those folks then in their private lives take action, or we can be here tonight and recognize the importance of cultural institutions in combating anti-Semitism.
Right. So, last question. We now live in a golden age of personal style. What do you think is the future of fashion, either in trends or the industry?
Oh, the future of fashion. Such a good question. I think this is more a personal perspective, perhaps, than one informed by my position as the director of the Texas Fashion Collection. But a lot of what I hope for fashion is for people to see more value in how they develop their own wardrobes, and see value in having fewer, better things that express themselves well. So I think part of that is really all of us just trying to get off this endless cycle of feeling like we need to buy and buy and buy.
More.
And I think that's a hard train to get off of, even for me. I spend time in an archive where things stay there forever, so I get to scratch some of that itch just by appreciating what's in our big, beautiful space. But in my own wardrobe, I really have to be thoughtful about what I'm adding. And part of me then thinks back to, the early years of Neiman Marcus, thinking through this mission to really think about quality and workmanship. It's kind of funny thinking that we might look, 117 years to the past for advice for what to do next. But I really think that I think the fast fashion train is going to run off the tracks, and I really hope that this is where we land after that.
Good advice. And it's more sustainable.
It really is. And it can bring you so much joy. I have pieces in my closet that even if I don't wear them regularly, just looking at them makes me so happy. And treating like the special occasion clothing I have almost like a work of art that I would hang on a wall makes me remember I don't have to buy something new if I really love the things I already have.
Right. And it's okay to wear that beautiful thing for people to see you in it over and over again, too.
Exactly.
Right.
Like we rewatch movies. We like looking at the same paintings at the Dallas Museum of Art over and over again. You can rewear things in your closet. Absolutely.
Well, Annette, this has been so much fun. You are a wonderful speaker. You are a wealth of information and knowledge, and we just really appreciate your partnership. And I want to keep thinking about what our next exhibition could be that you can help us with. So it's really been wonderful for us to have an exhibition that teaches history, but that's also fun. And you have helped us end on a very high note. We will be open until 9, so if you haven't gone through the exhibition Walk This Way, please do. And if you know people who haven't seen it, encourage them to come before it closes at the end of the day on Sunday. And thank you all for being with us tonight.